Today's lesson will be on Chapter 20, the Atlantic World. All right, so Spain's American Empire. This is Section 1. And today you guys will analyze the voyages of Columbus and other Spanish explorers and the Spanish colonization of the Americas. So the main idea, the voyages of Columbus prompted the Spanish to establish colonies in the Americas. So why does this matter now? Throughout the Americas, Spanish culture, language, and descendants are the legacy of this period. All right, so here's some terms and names we're going to go over. Christopher Columbus, colony. Hernando Cortez, conquistador. Francisco Pizarro. A couple other ones are encomienda and circumnavigate. All right, so competition for wealth in Asia among European nations was fierce, and competition prompted an Italian sea captain named Christopher Columbus to make a daring voyage from Spain in 1492. Instead of sailing south around Africa and then east, Columbus sailed west, right across the Atlantic Ocean, in search of an alternate trade route to Asia and its riches. Columbus never reached Asia. He actually thought he did, but instead he stepped onto an island in the Caribbean. And that event would bring together the peoples of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. So the voyages of Columbus, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria sailed out of a Spanish port around dawn on August 3rd, 1492. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In the early hours of October 12th, 1492, a lookout aboard the Pinta caught a sight of shoreline in the distance. And thinking he successfully reached the East Indies, Columbus called the surprised inhabitants, Indians actually, and that was a mistake because he mistaken the Native Americans as Indians. He thought he actually landed on India, but in reality, he landed in America. So, I mean, they were really Native Americans who he saw, but like I said, he thought he landed in India, so he called them Indians, and that's why Native Americans today are called Indians. Okay, so Columbus had miscalculated where he was. He did not reach the East Indies where he thought he did. Instead, he landed on an island in the Bahamas in the Caribbean Sea. And the natives were not Indians, but a group called themselves the Taino Indians or Native Americans. And if you have Puerto Rican or Dominican Republic descent, you are most likely, your ancestors were most likely Taino Indians. Nonetheless, Columbus claimed the island for Spain. He named this holy land San Salvador. I mean, that's what it translates into in Spanish. Holy land, holy savior. Sorry. So that's what he named this island, San Salvador, or Holy Savior. Yeah. So if you do have Puerto Rican or Dominican descent, you are most likely Taino Indian, and Spanish too. My daughter's Puerto Rican, so she has Taino descent and Spanish descent because we tested her DNA, and that is a fact. Facts. Spitting facts. All right. The search for gold was one of the main reasons for Columbus's journey. So he was looking for some gold, and this is where he's going to start. His first voyage is colored in blue. His second voyage is colored in red, and his third voyage was colored in green. Oh, wow, look at that. He even had a fourth voyage. Most people think Christopher Columbus just came once. Nope. He's going to go all the way here. He's going to land in the Bahamas, go to Cuba, San Domingo. This is Hispaniola now, which is Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And he would go all the way back to Spain. So he made a couple of journeys. All right, so when gold was not found, Columbus sailed around the Caribbean looking for some gold. But he could not find that. Columbus spent 96 days exploring some small islands in what is now known as the Bahamas and the coastlines of two other Caribbean islands known as Cuba and Hispaniola, which is Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He claimed all of the islands for Spain and gave them Spanish names. So this is why all these islands down here have Spanish names. Let's see. He planted a cross on all the lands he discovered and promised to assert Christian dominance. So he was going to spread Christianity. Okay, in January 1493, Columbus returned to Spain and reported that he had reached the islands off of Asia, known as the Indies. False, that was not correct. Spain funded 3 more voyages. When he set sail for the Americas in September 1493, Columbus was no longer an explorer, but an empire builder. He commanded a fleet of some 17 ships and several hundred armed soldiers. He brought 5 priests and more than 1,000 colonists, so 1,000 people who wanted to start a new life in this new land. Their arrival on Hispaniola, Haiti, or the Dominican Republic, now known as today, signaled the start of a culture clash that would continue for the next 5 centuries. A century is 100 years, so this is going to be a culture clash for the next 500 years. That's a long time. That's up until the 1900s, the end of the 1900s. All right, so here's another map of the voyages of Columbus. This is, let's see, Cuba, Hispaniola, which is Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right here. Pretty cool. This is where he's sailing all the way around this area. All right, other explorers take to the seas. In 1500, a Portuguese explorer named Pedro Alvarez Cabral. Oh man, I'm terrible at pronouncing Portuguese. He reached the shores of modern-day Brazil and claimed the land for his country. Yeah, forgive me if I say these names wrong. A year later, Amerigo Vespucci. America was actually named after this guy. Amerigo, he was an Italian in the service of Portugal. So the country of Portugal was going to be hiring a lot of these other explorers to do some exploring for him. He also traveled along the eastern coast of South America, and upon his return to Europe, he claimed that the land was not part of Asia, but a new world. And in 1507, a German mapmaker named the new continent America in honor of Amerigo Vespucci. So Amerigo didn't even claim that, hey, I found these lands. Not found them, but I was the one, who really figured out that this was a new land, not the Indies. Let's name it after me. It was actually some German map maker. It was just like, yo, in the honor of this guy, I'm going to name it after him, which is kind of cool. America's kind of a cool name. I like that name. I think it would be a lot. I think America is a lot better sounding than Columbus land. Columbus was a tyrant anyway. Killed a bunch of people. All right, so in 1519, a Portugal explorer, Ferdinand Magellan, led the bloodiest exploration yet. Several years earlier, Spanish explorer Balboa had marched through modern-day Panama. That's going to be in Central America, below Mexico, and had become the first European to gaze upon the Pacific Ocean. Soon after, Magellan convinced the King of Spain to fund his voyage into the newly discovered ocean. With about 250 men and 5 ships, Magellan sailed around the southern end of South America and into the waters of the Pacific. So he was going to be one of the first Europeans, if not the first European, into the Pacific Ocean. The fleet sailed for months without seeing land except for some small islands. Food supplies soon ran out. After exploring the island of Guam, Magellan and his crew eventually reached the Philippines. So he was going pretty far. He was going into Asia. Magellan became involved with a local war, and he was actually killed there. His crew was greatly reduced by disease and starvation and continued sailing west towards home. Out of Magellan's original crew, only 18 men in one ship arrived back in Spain in 1522, nearly 30 years after. Nearly 3 years, not 30. That would be a really long time. Nearly 3 years after they had left. So, out of Magellan's original crew, only 18 in one ship. Only 18 men in one ship arrived back in Spain. And it took 3 years to make that journey. They were the first people to circumnavigate or sail around the world. So here is Magellan's voyage. Let's see. He started off here in Portugal. Did I say it was Portugal? Yep, and it's Portuguese explorer. All right, so he started off in Portugal. Woo! He went all the way down here, down to the southern tip of South America. This is South America. This is North America. This is where we live in New Jersey. He went down South America, went all the way through here, came back here, landed on the Philippines, got into a battle, got killed. And then his crew was like, you know what, we got to finish this journey. And went all the way back here to the Cape of Good Hope. That's Africa. And back up to Spain. It's crazy that they were able to do that. I don't think I would sail across the world right now, even if you paid me. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool if you could, though. I think so. All right. Let's continue on. All right. In 1519, a Spaniard named Hernando Cortez landed on the shores of Mexico, and the Spanish had turned their attention to the American mainland. Cortez marched inland, looking to claim new lands for Spain, and Cortez and many other Spanish explorers followed him were known as conquistadors, and they were allured by rumors of vast lands which filled with gold and silver. Conquistadors, or Spanish explorers, carved out colonies in new regions that would become Mexico, South America, and the United States. The Spanish were the first European settlers in the Americas, and as a result of their colonization, the Spanish greatly enriched their empire and left a mark on the cultures of North and South America that still exist today. That's why Mexico speaks Spanish right now, and a lot of other South American countries also speak Spanish because of the conquistadors that landed in 1519. That was, what, 500 years ago? 501 years ago? Okay, after marching for weeks through difficult mountain passes, Cortez and his force of roughly 600 men finally reached the magnificent Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, which is also known as Mexico City nowadays. The Aztec Emperor Montezuma II was convinced at first that Cortez was a god wearing armor. He agreed to give the Spanish explorer a share of the empire's existing gold. So this guy's just going to give up all of his gold because he thought Cortez was a god because he was dressed in all this fine armor. But Cortez wasn't satisfied. Despite being greatly outnumbered, Cortez and his men conquered the Aztecs in 1521. Several factors played a key role in the stunning victory. The Spanish had the advantage of superior weaponry, Aztec arrows were no match for the Spaniards' muskets and cannons. Musket, it was like one of the first guns. Cortez was able to enlist the help of various Native American groups as well to help defeat them. Measles, mumps, smallpox, and typhus were some of the diseases Europeans were to bring with them to the Americas. Native Americans had never been exposed to these diseases. Ugh. Thus, they had developed no natural immunity to them. Just like right now, what's going on with COVID-19. Humans don't really have a immunity to COVID-19. That's why a lot of people are dying. And as a result, they died by the hundreds of thousands because there's no vaccine for these guys. So these guys are going to be dropping left and right. So in time, the European diseases would truly devastate the natives of central Mexico, killing millions of them. All right, Spanish conquest in Peru in 1532. Another conquistador, Francisco Pizarro, marched 200 men into South America. Pizarro met the Inca ruler near the city of Camaracha, and that's in Peru. I could be pronouncing that wrong as well. I'm not very good at Spanish either. So the Inca ruler commanded a force of about 30,000 men. He brought several thousand, mostly unarmed men to a meeting. So this guy commanded 30,000 men, and he brought a lot of these guys to a meeting with Francisco Pizarro, and the Spanish were actually waiting there, like in bushes and stuff, and just ambushed him. That's, if you could see this photo right here. The Spaniards waited in ambush to crush the Inca force, and they captured the Inca ruler. So they're going to take him by force. But the Inca ruler was like the Alpha Data. I can't say his name. It's really hard to pronounce. He's going to offer to fill a room once with gold and twice with silver in exchange for his release. So the Inca ruler goes to this meeting. He thinks he's going to meet with Pizarro in a peaceful meeting. He brings several thousand of his guys. They all get ambushed. They all get stabbed by the Spanish, and then they take him hostage. However, after receiving the ransom, the Spanish strangled the Inca ruler. So after receiving all this gold that he filled the room with, the guy ends up getting strangled. Demoralized by their leader's death, the remaining Inca force retreated from their main city. And Pizarro marched right into the Inca capital, and he captured it without a struggle in 1533. So this is how he was able to conquer the Incas. All right, so the Spanish conquests. As Cortez and Pizarro conquered the civilizations of the Americas, fellow conquistadors defeated other Native American peoples. Spanish explorers also conquered the Mayans in the Yucatan and Guatemala. By the middle of the 16th century, Spanish had created an American empire. It included New Spain, that's Mexico and parts of Guatemala, as well as other lands in Central and South America and the Caribbean. All right, Spain's pattern of conquest. In building their new American empire, the Spaniards drew from techniques used during the reconquest of Spain. When conquering the Muslims in Spain, the Spanish lived among them to impose their Spanish culture upon them. The Spanish settlers that came to America were mostly men, and as a result, the relationships between the Spanish settlers and native women were common. And these relationships created a large mestizo, or mixed Spanish and Native American population. So once again, My wife is Puerto Rican, so the Spanish, when they came over to the Americas, um, they were living amongst the Native Americans. So she has Native American blood in her, she has Spanish blood in her, and she also has um, African blood in her because of the slave trade, but we'll get into that later. All right, encomiendas. Although the Spanish conquistadors lived among the native people, they also oppressed them. They did not treat them very nicely. That's what oppressed means. In their effort to exploit the land for its precious resources, Spanish forced Native Americans to work in a system known as encomienda. Under the system, natives farmed, ranched, and mined for the Spanish landlords. So the Spanish were just going to enslave these Native Americans pretty much. These landlords had received the rights to the natives' labor from the Spanish authorities. So Spain, that was an ocean away, was like, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. The holders of the encomiendas promised the Spanish rulers that they would act fairly and respect the workers. Yeah, right. However, many abused Native Americans and worked many laborers to death, especially in the dangerous mines. All right, the Portuguese in Brazil. One area of South America that remained outside of Spanish control was Brazil. In 1500, Cabral claimed the land for Portugal. So we already talked about this guy. And during the 1530s, colonists began settling Brazil's coastal region. Finding little gold or silver, the settlers began growing sugar, clearing out huge areas of forest land. The Portuguese built giant sugar plantations. The demand for sugar in Europe was great, and the colony was soon enriched by Portugal. So Brazil's going to have this great land to grow sugar. So it's going to make it very prosperous. And in time, the colonists pushed further west into Brazil. Well, Brazil wasn't going to get rich. It was going to be the Portuguese that got rich. Expand production of sugar led to the Atlantic slave trade. They're going to need people to work these sugar farms or these sugar plantations. These Portuguese weren't going to do it, so what are they going to do? The Portuguese were going to come down to Africa and start capture people, make them into slaves, and then ship them over to South America. This is when we get into the slave trade. Spain's influence expands. Spain's American colonies helped make it the richest, most powerful nation in the world during much of the 16th century. So some of the richest countries back then, the 1500s, was going to be Spain is going to be number one, and then probably Portugal, and then we're going to get into England. England kind of comes in a little bit later. Ships filled their treasures from the Americas and continually sailed to the Spanish harbors. Treasures being not just only gold and silver, because they weren't finding a lot of that. In some areas they were, but they were mostly, this land was really good for farming. So maybe that's what most of them were talking about. This wealth led to the golden age of art and culture in Spain, because there was so much money going into these countries because of the Americas, North and South America, because of what the Spanish and Portuguese were doing over there. Spain built a powerful navy to protect its treasures, and the Spanish also strengthened their military forces. And for a century and a half, that's 150 years, Spain's army rarely lost a battle. Meanwhile, Spain enlarged its American empire by settling in parts of what is now known as the United States. So they were going to start down here in the Caribbean, kind of come in here into Central America, South America, and then they're eventually going to go into North America. In 1513, Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon landed on the coast of modern-day Florida and claimed it for Spain. What do you know? So, claiming it for Spain again. Spain backed expeditions into southwestern United States. So they're going to come up from Mexico and go into Texas and Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. Arizona and New Mexico. By 1540, after building an empire that stretched from Mexico to Peru, the Spanish once again looked to the land what is now the United States. And in 1540 and to 1541, Francisco Vasquez de Colorado led an expedition throughout much of present-day Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Coronado found little gold in the dry deserts of the Southwest. That's why he was going in this area. And that's why Colorado is named after this guy, Coronado. As a result, the Spanish monarchy assigned mostly priests to explore and colonize the future United States. Catholic priests had accomplished conquistadors or Spanish explorers. The conquistadors had come in search of wealth, and the priests who had accompanied them had come in search of converts. They wanted to convert people into Christianity, mostly the Native Americans. Actually, all the Native Americans. They built a capital called Santa Fe in New Mexico, which is still there. Spanish priests also pushed for better treatment of Native Americans. Oh, the Spanish priests were so nice. Priests spoke out against the cruel treatments of natives. I don't really believe that, but okay. They criticized the harsh pattern of labor and emerged under the encomienda system. So they were criticizing the Spanish priests, were criticizing how the Spanish conquistadors, the explorers, how they were treating the Native Americans. Slave labor began to transport into Africa. Slave labor began to be transported from Africa. This is when I'm talked about people being captured in Africa and being brought over to the Americas as slaves. Terrible, but we will get into that later. The Spanish government abolished the encomienda system in 1514, and in 1680, this Pueblo ruler, who was a Native American tribe in the southwestern region of America, led a well-organized rebellion against the Spanish. And the rebellion involved more than 8,000 warriors from villages all over New Mexico. And the native fighters drove the Spanish back into New Spain. For the next 12 years, until the Spanish regained control of the area, the southwest region of the future United States once again belonged to its original inhabitants, which were the Native Americans. Here's the native population of central Mexico during 1500 to 1620. So you can definitely see in 1500 they had 25 million people. And then by 1605, about 100 years later, they were down to 1 million. That's a lot of people dying. That's like 24 million people dying. It's crazy. All right, so which country was the most richest, the most powerful in this 16th century, and why? See if you can answer that question. I'll give you the answer. It's Spain. It's Spain. All right. Thanks for listening. That's your lesson for today. Peace out.